This collection of spine-chilling, allegedly true tales collected from across the globe is brought to you in an array of writing styles and narrators. Each story is guaranteed to keep you on the edge of your seat. Whether you're looking to get creeped out, freaked out, or have your wits scared out of you, this compilation has it all. Get ready to be thoroughly entertained and spooked. The following highly disturbing story is from the United States. Today's narrative unfolds from the perspective of a young man known to us as Ben. Like all stories that tread the fine line between the ordinary and the extraordinary, we bring his account to you just as it was recounted to us. The veracity of his experience rests in your hands, our valued listeners and viewers, to discern and interpret. Please note that any opinions or beliefs expressed are solely those of the contributor. Our role is to faithfully relay his story to you. And now, without further ado, here is Ben's tale. Hi, I'm about to share a story that might stretch the bounds of belief. In a world rife with chaos and extremism, it's frightening to see how some can lose not just their grip on reality, but also their very humanity. As an engineering student, my life often revolves around formulas and structures, but I'm also a part-time model, which adds a dash of unpredictability to my routine. That summer, I felt a strong urge to break away from the familiar, to seek out adventures that were worlds apart from my textbooks and photo shoots. So I embarked on a cross-country trip during my summer break. It was more than just a journey. It was a quest for new experiences, for stories I could one day tell with a sense of wonder. With just a backpack and a spirit ready for whatever lay ahead, I boarded the bus, eager to see where this road less traveled would take me. The bus journey took me through changing landscapes, each mile introducing a new facet of America's vast beauty. It was a random choice that led me to the Pacific Northwest. I remember waking up from a light doze, feeling the urge to step out and breathe in some fresh air. The driver had announced a short stop at a remote gas station for refueling, somewhere in the heart of Pacific Northwest's sprawling remote wilderness. As I stretched my legs in that desolate yet captivating setting, my attention was caught by a young lady working at the gas station. She had a charm about her, a blend of allure and mystery. Her name was Pat, and she wore a smile that seemed too bright for such a remote place. We struck up a conversation, casual at first, but there was an immediate connection. Before I knew it, Pat invited me to join her for dinner. She mentioned she was part of a community living in remote seclusion. The idea sounded intriguing, an offbeat experience that was exactly what I was seeking on this trip. Driven by curiosity and the allure of her company, I agreed. We left the gas station in her dusty old pickup, heading into the depths of the remote wilderness, towards an encounter that would turn out to be anything but ordinary. The journey with Pat led us deeper into the wilderness, the landscape around us lush with woodlands. We drove many miles. Eventually, we arrived at a secluded plot of land deep in the forests. This was the community Pat had mentioned, a collection of some trailers and a few small, prefabricated buildings clustered together, each one radiating a sense of simple, sustainable living. The community welcomed me with open arms. Their friendliness, though overwhelmingly enthusiastic, felt somewhat unnatural, as if each smile and handshake were part of a well-rehearsed script. Despite this, I was taken in by their lifestyle. As someone deeply interested in sustainability, I found their dedication admirable. They had an almost religious reverence for the natural world, which seemed like a good thing. Moreover, I was enchanted by Pat. Her presence made any doubt secondary. She was passionate about the community's cause, and her zeal was infectious. I found myself drawn not just to her, but to the ideals she represented. It was easy to overlook the oddities around me when I was with her, lost in conversations about our planet and our role as its stewards. In those first few days, I immersed myself in the community's way of life, embracing their routines and participating in their discussions. There was something liberating about being so close to nature, far removed from the concrete jungles I was used to. Little did I know, something more sinister was brewing. The charismatic leader of the community, a man whose presence commanded attention and respect, took me to what they called their sacred place. It was a striking outcrop of rocks not far from where we stayed. There, in the midst of ancient stones under the open sky, I was inducted into their fold. I remember feeling a mix of apprehension and intrigue. The ceremony, though strange, had an allure that was hard to resist, especially with Pat by my side. Her belief in their cause and her dedication to the natural world were captivating. I found myself falling for her, drawn not only to her beauty but also to her conviction. As I stood there, surrounded by chanting and the flickering light of the ceremonial fire, a thought crossed my mind. If rituals are part of what they do, as long as it's for the greater good, then perhaps it wasn't such a bad thing. It was a thought that comforted me, even as I sensed the complexity of what I was getting myself into. I have a more scientific approach to nature conservation, but I convinced myself to respect their strange approach. Those initial 2 weeks with the community, which I had once considered blissful, slowly began to unravel, revealing a reality I wasn't prepared to confront. It was subtle at first, a slight change in the air, a feeling that something was amiss. The warmth and smiles that had greeted me so openly upon my arrival started to feel less genuine, more mechanical, as if they were masks hiding true intentions. Each day, this shift became more pronounced. Conversations that were once light and welcoming now had an edge to them, a guarded quality that made me feel like an outsider. The openness that had defined my early days in the community was replaced with a sense of secrecy, of things being said and done just out of sight and understanding. I noticed small groups forming and hushed discussions held just out of earshot. The community members, who had once interacted with each other with ease, now seemed to carry a burden, a weight that I couldn't understand. Their laughter, once a common sound in the evenings, now rarely broke the growing silence that enveloped us. This transformation extended beyond social interactions. The daily routines and tasks, which I had participated in with a sense of camaraderie, now felt like rituals, each one carrying a significance that was not shared with me. It was as if the community was moving to a rhythm that I was not privy to, a dance whose steps I hadn't learned. Looking back, it was as if the community was shedding skin, revealing a truer, more complex identity underneath, one casting a dark shadow of something foreboding. As these changes unfolded around me, I found myself increasingly alienated, caught between my affection for Pat and a growing sense of unease about the place I had come to call home, however briefly. The shift in the community's atmosphere was disconcerting, but nothing prepared me for the moment I realized I was trapped. It started with a call from my family. My mother was seriously ill. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew I had to leave immediately to be with her. But that's when I discovered the chilling truth of my situation in the cult. After informing Pat and a few other members that I needed to leave, we shared a quiet dinner. Once we finished, I returned to my room with the intention of packing my things for an early departure the next morning. It was then that I discovered my mobile phone was missing. A frantic search ensued. I scoured every inch of my room, but to no avail. The phone was nowhere to be found. A sense of panic washed over me as the stark reality set in. Without my phone, I was completely isolated, severed from any contact with the world beyond the community's boundaries. Confronting the community members about my missing phone only deepened my sense of dread. Their responses were evasive, their eyes avoiding mine. It was clear they knew something but weren't willing to share. The friendly faces I had grown accustomed to now seemed cold and distant. They claimed the pickup truck was broken and they could not take me anywhere until it was fixed, but that will take time, they claimed. They supposedly had no phones as electronics were against their beliefs. I tried to leave on foot, but the vastness of the remote wilderness and my lack of knowledge about the surrounding area made it clear that it wouldn't be easy. I felt like a prisoner, held against my will in a place that I had initially perceived as a sanctuary. My anxiety escalated with each passing hour. The isolation of the remote wilderness, once a source of peace, now felt like a cage. The community's true nature was revealing itself, and I was caught in the middle of it. I couldn't shake the feeling of being constantly watched and monitored for any signs of dissent. The realization that I was not a guest, but a captive, changed everything. I had to find a way out, not just for my sake, but for my mother's too. The truth hit me like a bolt of lightning on a clear day. It came from Pat, the girl I had grown so fond of. She revealed to me the horrifying truth about the community, a truth that turned my blood cold. The community was not just a group of nature enthusiasts. They were extremists, a sect devoted to the earth spirit. Their beliefs had morphed into something dark and twisted. Being trapped by a crazy sect was bad enough, but it was about to get a whole lot worse. Pat explained with trembling lips that the sect believed in human sacrifice as a way to appease nature. I was shocked. Apparently, they originally started as well-meaning individuals concerned about the earth, but under the influence of their radical leader, their concern had morphed into a fanatical religion. They saw humanity as a blight upon the earth, a cancer that needed to be cut out. In their warped view, sacrificing human lives was the ultimate act of devotion to nature. They saw themselves as the test case for this new religion, which one day they wanted the entire world to adopt and have people exterminated on a large scale. For the present, the killings are merely ritualistic, but in the future, when they plan to go mainstream, culling of humans will be on an industrial scale and focused at those who won't adopt their religion. And it still got worse. A third shock was the revelation about their choice of sacrifice. While sacrifices are still merely a ritualistic practice, they will give nature the best they can find, and in their minds, they narrowed it down to handsome or attractive people. The sect believed that attractive people were the most fitting offerings to nature, symbolizing the beauty of the planet they worshipped. My presence there wasn't a chance encounter. It was orchestrated. As someone who does modeling, I obviously stood out. Pat confessed that the sect had been using her to lure young, handsome men like me for their rituals. If she failed to find a suitable candidate, the least happy person in the community would be chosen, because lack of happiness in their mind indicated lack of enlightenment by the earth spirit. That's why everyone was initially so overly friendly. They were all acting, vying to avoid being selected. But with my induction ritual signaling the leader's approval of me as the next sacrifice, their pretenses had dropped. The weight of her words was crushing. The realization that I was marked for a grim fate left me reeling. But amid this revelation, Pat's eyes conveyed another truth. She had genuinely fallen in love with me. Her confession was not just an admission of the sect's sinister practices, but also a desperate plea. She couldn't bear the thought of me being sacrificed. With the dark revelation hanging over me like a storm cloud, escape was the only thing on my mind. Pat, despite her deep connection to the community, stood by me. She couldn't leave with me. Her ties were too strong, and her departure would raise immediate suspicion. But her resolve to help me escape was unwavering. Under the cloak of darkness, we executed our plan. Pat had gathered information about the community's routines, the guard shifts, and the safest route through the remote wilderness. She handed me a map, crudely drawn but detailed enough to guide me to safety. Her eyes were filled with a mix of fear and determination as she whispered instructions and words of encouragement. The plan was simple yet risky. I had to slip out of my room in the dead of night, avoid the guards who patrolled the area, and then make my way through the remote wilderness, following Pat's map to reach a road several miles away. From there, I could hopefully hitchhike to safety. Every step was fraught with danger. My heart pounded in my chest as I tiptoed past sleeping quarters, avoiding any noise that could betray my presence. The moon was my only companion, casting long shadows that both helped and hindered my progress. The journey through the remote wilderness was harrowing. The terrain was unforgiving, the silence deafening. Every rustle felt like a warning, every gust of wind a whisper of danger. But the thought of what awaited me if I stayed propelled me forward. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the road just as the first light of dawn broke the horizon. With a mix of exhaustion and relief, I flagged down a passing truck. The driver, a kind-hearted stranger, could see the desperation in my eyes. He didn't ask many questions as he drove me to the nearest town. As I sat in the safety of the truck, watching the remote wilderness landscape pass by, I realized that part of me was left behind. Pat had saved me, sacrificing her own chance of escape. Her bravery and the love that had blossomed between us, yet she was responsible for the demise of many before me. How do I reconcile those facts? Returning to the world outside the remote wilderness sect, I found myself at a police station, struggling to reconcile my past experiences. I detailed my story to the officers, from the initial encounter at the gas station to my desperate escape. Despite the incredulous nature of my tale, their investigation began. The police search revealed remnants of the sect's presence, like trailer stands and signs of farming, but no concrete evidence of the community's current whereabouts. There were no human remains, nothing to substantiate my harrowing account. The case went nowhere, and I felt despondent ever since. In the aftermath, I often pondered the experience. The sect's noble environmental concerns had spiraled into a disregard for human life. Their extreme views now alarm me, and I steer clear of such ideologies. As to what happened to Pat, I naturally have no idea, and I don't know if I should care. It's a conflict I have never resolved for myself. Feeling let down by the lack of police action and unable to share my story for fear of skepticism, I hope that sharing it here warns others of the dangers of fanaticism. Sincerely, Ben. Here follows an eerie, ghostly story sent from Argentina.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we bring you a strange case that has puzzled the residents of a small town in the Argentinian Pampas for decades. We present to you the poltergeist of the Pampas. This supernatural being has been known to move objects, make strange noises, and even harm those who dare to cross its path. Join us on this spine-chilling journey as we explore the mysterious and terrifying events that have occurred in San Ignacio. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button to be notified of our latest uploads. Let's dive into the world of the unknown and discover the secrets of the poltergeist of the Pampas. In the heart of the Argentinian Pampas, there was a small town named San Ignacio where life was peaceful and slow-paced. The town was surrounded by vast grasslands that stretched as far as the eye could see, and in the distance, the Andes Mountains stood tall and proud. One summer, a strange occurrence began to happen in San Ignacio. People began to report that their houses were being haunted by a poltergeist. The poltergeist would move objects around, turn appliances on and off, and even make strange noises at night. At first, the townspeople dismissed the reports as mere superstition, but as the days went by, the activity of the poltergeist became more frequent and intense. Tragically, it seemed to have taken a particular interest in a young girl named Martina, who lived on the outskirts of town. Martina lived in her deceased grandmother's home in San Ignacio. She had to be close to school, as she was in her final year. Her parents lived on their cattle ranch out in the rural Pampas. Martina was a kind and gentle young lady who loved to spend her afternoons reading or doing schoolwork. But as soon as the sun began to set, strange things would happen in her house. Chairs would move on their own, doors would slam shut, and shadows would dance on the walls. Martina tried to ignore the strange occurrences at first, but soon it became too much to bear. She confided in her friend, a local farmer named Juan, who promised to help her figure out what was going on. One night, the poltergeist's attacks became more violent than ever. As Martina lay in her bed, the poltergeist appeared and pinned her down, trying to choke her. Martina struggled to break free, but the poltergeist's grip only tightened. As she gasped for air, Martina remembered the words her grandmother had taught her, the Lord's Prayer. With all the strength she could muster, Martina began to recite the prayer. At first, her voice was barely audible, but as she repeated the words, her voice grew louder and more confident. Suddenly, the poltergeist's grip loosened and it vanished into thin air. Martina lay on the floor, panting and shaking, but relieved that the nightmare was finally over. After that terrifying incident, Martina knew that she had to be strong and courageous. She refused to let the poltergeist intimidate her, and she began to recite the Lord's Prayer every night before she went to bed. And though the poltergeist never attacked her again, Martina never forgot the lesson she had learned, that sometimes the most powerful weapon against the supernatural was faith and courage. One night, Juan and Martina decided to spend the night in her house, hoping to catch a glimpse of the poltergeist. As they were waiting, they suddenly heard strange noises coming from the kitchen. They cautiously made their way to the kitchen and found that the cabinets were opening and closing on their own. Suddenly, a cold breeze blew through the room and they heard a voice whispering their names. They turned around and saw a terrifying and shadowy figure in the corner of the room, its eyes glowing in the dark. Juan immediately knew what they were dealing with. The poltergeist was not just a mischievous spirit, but a malevolent one. He quickly took out a crucifix and began reciting prayers in Spanish, hoping to banish the poltergeist back to the realm of the dead. The poltergeist didn't go down without a fight. It flung objects around the room, trying to intimidate them, but Juan stood his ground, and soon the poltergeist vanished into thin air. From that day on, the town of San Ignacio was at peace. The poltergeist was never seen or heard from again, and Martina could finally sleep soundly at night. But Juan knew that he had to keep his guard up, for in a land as vast and mysterious as the Argentinian Pampas, one never knew what other supernatural beings might be lurking in the shadows. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story about a poltergeist haunting a small town in the Argentinian Pampas.
The following harrowing story was sent from Australia.
Today, we bring to life a harrowing tale from a small mining town in the outback of Australia. What you're about to hear is a first-hand account sent to us by Simon, a nurse whose night at the local hospital turned into an ordeal he would never forget. Let me read you Simon's emailed letter. Hi, my name is Simon, and I'm reaching out to share a deeply unsettling experience that still haunts my memories. It might come across as unbelievable, but I assure you, every word is true. I hail from the bustling city of Sydney, and in my early years as a nurse, driven by a desire for adventure and change, I found myself accepting a position in a small to medium-sized hospital nestled within a small mining town in the outback. I've chosen to keep the town's name confidential, as I believe the story, as chilling as it is, should not overshadow the place or its people. I forged strong friendships with many of the locals, and I feel it would be unfair to cast a dark shadow over their home. Nevertheless, I feel compelled to share the eerie and perplexing events I witnessed during my time there, while maintaining the anonymity of the town and its residents. I was relatively new in town. The hospital, a modest and time-worn structure on the outskirts of the town, had once been sufficient for the sparse, permanent population of this isolated mining town. However, the recent influx of fly-in, fly-out workers had strained its capacity, necessitating the construction of a larger, more modern facility closer to the mine. The town's small, permanent community, though they were genuine salt-of-the-earth folk, exuded an undercurrent of something unsettling. An eerie ambience pervaded, suggesting layers of trauma and tragedy thinly veiled by a facade of normalcy. I would later discover that the hospital itself was the epicenter of a dark chapter in the town's history, a harrowing incident shrouded in silence, with no one willing to speak of it. The events of one particular summer night at the hospital have etched themselves into my memory, creating nightmares that have persisted ever since. Positioned at the far end of the corridor on level 2 was a ward, now nothing but a charred remnant of a tragic accident that occurred merely half a year prior. The new hospital was on the verge of opening its doors, and the decision was made to forego any renovations on the devastated ward. Instead, it was sealed off, leaving only the doorway accessible. This left a palpable aura of abandonment and sorrow hanging in the air, making that part of the hospital feel like a realm detached from time and reality. Lured by an irresistible sense of curiosity and equipped with a flashlight, I found my way to the desolate part of the hospital, standing before Ward 3, a grim testament to a tragedy shrouded in silence. Nobody seemed willing to delve into the dark details of this recent traumatic event. Yet my persistent inquiry eventually led me to a seasoned staff nurse who shared the horrific account. Only 6 months had passed since the catastrophic accident transpired in that very ward. A young, unsuspecting doctor was in the midst of adjusting an oxygen tank when it suddenly exploded. He was instantly decapitated by the metal shards of the cylinder. His lifeless body was violently propelled through a window, landing in the parking lot below. The resultant inferno engulfed the ward, mercilessly claiming the lives of a lady nurse, a local mother of 3 children, and 6 male patients, 4 locals, and 2 fly-in fly-out workers from Brisbane. Since that dreadful day, the charred skeleton of Ward 3 has stood untouched, serving as a silent memorial to those who perished. The entire town was suspended in a state of anticipation, awaiting the completion of the new hospital with updated and safer equipment. Venturing forward with a cautious push against the resisting door, I found myself transported into a realm seemingly frozen in a moment long gone. The immediate onslaught of odors was overwhelming. The pungent scent of soot mixed with the acrid aroma of charred surfaces and burnt furniture filled the air, painting a vivid picture of the fire's fury and destruction. As I cautiously navigated through the wreckage, the atmosphere around me began to shift and change. The space around me had a tangible heaviness, a pressure that seemed to grow with each step I took, as if the building was sharing the burden of its tragic history, inviting me to bear witness to the events that had unfolded within these scorched and blackened walls. At first, I questioned my own senses, suspecting that the eerie atmosphere was playing tricks on my mind. A subtle sound reached my ears, a whisper perhaps, and then it dissipated into the silent, oppressive air. It wasn't long before the sound returned, slightly clearer this time, though still on the verge of perception. I scanned the darkened space, my heart racing, fully aware that I was the sole living being in this ruin. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows themselves were whispering. The idea was almost fantastical, like a scene straight out of a cliched horror movie, but the reality of the situation was undeniable and far more unsettling. I stood there, caught in the surreal moment, my rational mind grappling with the unnerving sensation that the remnants of the ward were communicating with me. I realize how absurd this might sound to you. This time, I couldn't deny it. I was hearing words, not with my ears, but directly in my mind. It's crucial to clarify that aside from the lasting effects of this incident, I have never experienced any form of mental illness. Neither have I ever used recreational drugs. Nevertheless, the words were too faint to make out clearly, yet their tone resonated with a deep sense of agony and despair, conjuring up intense imagery of suffering within my thoughts. How on earth could this be happening? The rational side of my brain tried to make sense of it, attributing the phenomenon to the wind's eerie whispers, or perhaps my own mind's deceptive tricks under the influence of the daunting atmosphere. Yet, a more primal part of me couldn't shake off the conviction that there was something more, something palpable in the air around me. The sensation of an unseen presence, of voices from the past still lingering, felt overwhelmingly real, casting a veil of surrealism over the entire experience. The whispers seemed to intertwine with silent screams, as if the souls who once inhabited this space were reliving their torment, and I was an involuntary witness to their pain. Even as I recount this experience now, a chill envelops me. My hairs stand on end, and I'm transported back to that eerie night, a testament to the indelible mark it left on my soul. At the same harrowing moment, the play of light and shadow on the walls created an illusion of movement, as though the remnants of the ward were reluctant to remain static, yearning to share their untold tales. But then, was it an illusion? Was there something? At that stage, I was petrified. But the surreal journey took a terrifying turn when, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a medical trolley. It was moving almost silently, autonomously through the dark, navigating the debris-laden floor with an eerie precision. Its wheels squeaked softly, a lullaby for the damned. At that point, I thought I have lost my mind, and I was terrified at the same time. I wanted to run, but my body would not respond. I was frozen in place. In the ambiguous dimness of the ward, my gaze was drawn to what seemed to be a colleague at the other end of the room, clad in the familiar white coat of our profession. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over me. I was not alone in this eerie expanse. My heart, which had been pounding in my chest, seemed to still as I realized help was at hand. But as the figure raised its arm, directing my attention to the gaping hole in the wall left by the tragic explosion, the sparse light caught the upper part of its frame. The sudden harsh illumination shattered my momentary sanctuary, revealing the gruesome truth. The figure before me was headless. Its white coat tricked my mind. In that chilling instant, relief morphed into dread, and I felt my blood run cold. As the cold touch of an unseen hand rested upon my shoulder, a whispered voice filled with urgency and sorrow filled my ear. "Leave this place. It's not safe," it begged, sending chills down my spine. The temperature dropped, and the air grew dense with a sinister energy. The smell of smoke intensified. The paradox of cold and smoke was beyond disturbing. Instinct took over, and suddenly my body responded. My legs moved before my mind could catch up, carrying me away from the whispers, the shadows, and the ghostly presence of Ward 3. In the corridor, I ran for the Level 2 emergency exit, down the stairs, and then exited the building via the lower emergency exit. It took me only seconds. I burst into the open, gasping for breath, the hospital's doors closing behind me, as if shielding me from the horrors within. Standing under the full moon, I was left to stare out into the vast expanse of the outback, its silence now a comforting embrace compared to the sinister chorus of the ward. The isolation of the town, the echoes of the tragedy, and my chilling encounter melded together, etching a permanent scar on my psyche. I've never been the same, and not for the better. The vast expanse of the outback, with its limitless horizons and tranquil, undisturbed landscapes, had silently observed both the tragic history of the hospital and my own spectral experience within its walls. The decapitated doctor, a tragic figure from the hospital's recent past, made his appearance, and his story unfolded before my very eyes. In that moment of ghostly revelation, I felt a deep certainty in my bones. I had witnessed something beyond the realm of the living, a spectral encounter that defied explanation. These souls, disturbed from their eternal rest, were not at peace. Their story, etched in the walls of the abandoned ward and whispered in the dark corners of the hospital, was a testament to their unrest. It's been several years since I made my way back to Sydney, leaving behind the remote mining town and its memories. The new hospital there has since opened its doors and is operating at full capacity. I've maintained connections with some former colleagues and friends from the town, staying in touch and exchanging stories. They tell me that the old, now abandoned hospital has become something of a local curiosity, drawing in brave youngsters and even ghost hunters from further afield. A plethora of stories and rumors now swirl around the place, adding layers of mystery and intrigue to its already dark history. I do miss the friends I made in that god-forsaken town. However, I don't miss the place. Kind regards, Simon. What would you do if you ever felt a strange presence or heard ghostly whispers in a hospital? Then please write about it in the comment section below.
Here follows a chilling tale with a historical context from South Africa.
Welcome to this episode. In the Cape Town archive, we find the strange case of the haunting of a farm called Verlorenfontein. The Buckley family from Leeds in the UK inherited money and saw the opportunity to leave the somberness of their existence. Up to this point, Peter Buckley and his wife Anna had both worked at a textile factory. Though the money could not buy them much land in England, it was enough to buy a decent sheep farm in the warm and sunny Cape Colony. They left their home and sailed to Cape Town. After a long journey, they finally arrived, and it wasn't long before they found the perfect farm in the South African Karoo. It was a beautiful place with rolling hills and vast plains, and the Buckleys were excited about the prospect of starting a new life in their new home. The family was thrilled to finally arrive at their new farm in the South African Karoo after a long journey from their home in Leeds. The vast expanse of land seemed to stretch out endlessly before them, dotted with fields of karoo shrubs and clusters of acacia trees. They immediately fell in love with their Karoo farmhouse, with its Victorian verandas and a wide porch that offered a view of the surrounding countryside. It was the perfect place for the family to settle down and start a new life. But what the family didn't know was that their new farm was located near the site of a brutal battle between the British and the Boers, which had taken place a few years before. The land was steeped in the blood of fallen soldiers, and the spirits of the dead still roamed the area, seeking revenge for their untimely demise. At first, the family was blissfully unaware of the haunting. They spent their days exploring the farm, tending to the animals, and enjoying the peacefulness of their new home. But as the sun set each night, strange things began to happen. Doors would creak open and shut on their own, and objects would move without explanation. The family's youngest daughter, Lily, claimed to see ghostly figures outside her bedroom window, and her older brother, James, would hear eerie whispers in the stillness of the night. Despite these occurrences, the family tried to shrug them off as mere coincidences. They thought that perhaps the house was just settling, or that the wind was playing tricks on their senses. But as time went on, the hauntings became more frequent and more violent. One night, the family awoke to the sound of pounding on the front door. When they opened it, no one was there. Another time, they found the furniture in the living room rearranged as if someone had been sitting in the chairs. As the haunting intensified, the family began to realize that they were not alone on the farm. They could feel the presence of the ghostly figures around them, and they knew that they had to do something to put an end to the haunting. One day, the family's cook tells them something that cannot be seen has moved into her quarters. Over the following weeks, she started doing strange things. The family tried everything they could think of to rid themselves of the ghostly presence. They called upon the local priest to bless the house. They even tried to conduct their own rituals to rid the house of the ghost, but the haunting continued unabated. One Sunday dinner, the family was shocked when their cook served them their beloved cat, roasted. She then became hysterical before running outside and off into the wilderness, never to be seen again. One evening at sunset, while the family was lingering on the veranda, a horse came galloping up to the house. It stopped at the stairs to the porch. Peter approached the bewildered animal. The poor creature got a fit when he touched its disturbed face and dropped dead on the spot. From that day onwards, a new phenomenon would haunt the Buckley family. Every night they would be woken by a horse galloping around the house. Yet when they went outside to check on it, there was nothing. As the haunting reached a fever pitch, the family realized that they had no choice but to abandon their home and flee the farm. The haunting continued after the family left, and to this day the farmhouse stands abandoned, a testament to the power of the past to shape our lives and our destinies. The ghostly figures of the fallen soldiers continue to haunt the South African Karoo to this day, a ghostly reminder of the bloody conflicts that shaped the region's history. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe and click the bell button if you don't mind sharing. Please leave a comment if you ever had a paranormal experience.
The following disturbing tale is from Indonesia, shared with us by a Balinese village elder who claims he was a child at the time of these events.
Friends, the enigmatic whispers of an unsolved mystery beckon. Today, we unveil a narrative cloaked in terror and mystery from the ethereal landscapes of Bali. Engage and delve deeper into a world where serene beauty intertwines with unspeakable horror. Amidst a night of raging storms and tumultuous seas, the peaceful slumber of a serene Balinese village was shattered. From the violent embrace of the storm-tossed waves, a grotesque abomination, part crab, part scorpion, and the size of a donkey cart, emerged, its deafening roars echoing the advent of an era of unspeakable terror. Dogs, the village's guardians against unseen entities, vanished mysteriously, as though they were devoured, one by one, night by night. Each night, hysterical barking was followed by the whimpering of another canine slain. A silence, deep and ominous, descended, each dawn revealing the dreadful remains scattered across the village alleyways. The temples, once symbols of divine serenity and spiritual solace, became epicenters of a sinister presence. Ominous whispers and ghastly shadows danced within the sacred confines, heralding the awakening of an ancient curse. The grotesque discovery of a family, savagely mutilated in the confines of their home, rendered the village breathless. An ancient, unspeakable evil from the sea's darkest depths had come to claim the land. Consumed by a terror that knew no name, the village elders, their voices trembling with the weight of the unspeakable, decreed an exodus, leaving the village to the ominous whispers and haunting lullabies of an ancient malevolence. Amidst the engulfing terror and impeding doom, young Kadek stood alone, unwavering. The sacred inscriptions and talismans of the ancient Hindu gods, his only weapons against the sinister echoes of the encroaching darkness. Their voices trembled with a mix of reverence and terror as the village elders implored Kadek to join the exodus. But the young warrior stood resolute, the echoes of his ancestors fueling his indomitable spirit. Nights of terror escalated into macabre theaters of horror. Each moonrise unveiled sinister tapestries of haunting echoes and unspeakable dread as the sea demon reveled in its ominous reign. Within the sacred precincts of the main temple, an ominous discovery awaited. Moonlight unveiled the demon's vile offspring, glistening eggs as foreboding as the sinister entity that laid them. The revelation galvanized Kadek's spirit. Each revelation of horror intensified his defiance. In the ominous silence of sinister nights, amidst echoing horrors, the young warrior stood, an embodiment of human resilience. A divine intervention surged through Kadek as the powers of Hindu gods flowed within him. With the echoing chants of sacred scriptures, he confronted the sea demon, an entity of unspeakable horror. The demon, under the sacred influence, staggered. Seizing the moment of divine intervention, Kadek lunged, his bamboo spear between two of the creature's exoskeletal armor plates, echoing the silent strength of warriors past, piercing the creature's vile flesh. A deafening roar marked the demon's vanquishment. Amidst the echoed silence of victory, Kadek, armed with the unyielding strength of celestial entities, turned to the glistening eggs. Each sacred chant, each echoed verse, marked the annihilation of the ominous offspring, heralding the village's silent liberation. The battle turned the previously innocent Kadek into a man, a heroic warrior. The temples, echoing the purification, became bastions of divine resurgence. The village, though silent, reverberated with the echoes of triumphant resilience. This tapestry of unspeakable terror and echoing triumph is woven into the serene landscapes of Bali. Every engagement, every shared thought, pulls us deeper into the echoing corridors of ancient horrors and silent victories. Click the bell and immerse into the haunting echoes of untold narratives, and please leave a comment on what you would do if you ever encountered a sea demon.
The next fascinating and nerve-wracking story was sent to us from a couple in South Africa. Their strange experience seems to have a strong link to the previous tale from Bali.
Welcome back to our channel. We recently received the following story from a married couple in South Africa. Hi, inspired by the chilling tale of the Balinese sea demon featured on your channel, I felt a pressing need to share the extraordinary experience that Marilise, my fiancée at the time, our fox terrier Joey and I had on a secluded beach in South Africa during the 1980s. This adventure, far removed from the era of instant digital communication, unfolded in a time when the mysterious still held sway over remote places. Our destination was a pristine stretch of beach along the South African south coast, known only to a few locals. This beach, hemmed in by imposing sand dunes and miles of wild bush belonging to a nature reserve, promised the perfect escape from the bustle of everyday life. The first few days were idyllic, filled with the simple pleasures of camping, cooking over an open fire, fishing along the shoreline, and the comforting sound of waves breaking on the shore. However, our sense of peace was disrupted one afternoon when we noticed something highly unusual, a strange cigar-shaped object hovering distantly over the ocean. It was unlike any aircraft we were familiar with, and it lingered there for hours, filling us with an uneasy sense of intrigue. It defied any conventional explanation, appearing too stable and solid to be a mirage, yet its distance was impossible to gauge. We speculated whether it could be a spacecraft from another world, but just as we were trying to make sense of it, the object vanished as if it had never been there. That evening, our sense of unease intensified. Unusual lights, which some nowadays might call orbs, appeared near our tent on the dunes, moving in inexplicable patterns. Their origin and nature were beyond our understanding, and their proximity sparked a growing concern within us. Thankfully, they kept their distance. Joey, our usually vocal fox terrier, responded not with barks, but with a silent, fixated gaze, an atypical behavior that only heightened the strangeness of the moment. Marilise clung tightly to my arm, her grip a mix of fear and fascination. Together, we watched, unable to tear our eyes away from the mesmerizing display. The lights pulsed and shifted, casting an ethereal glow around our campsite, before they disappeared into the night's embrace. Isolated as we were, with our campsite a considerable distance from the car and enveloped in darkness, I suggested to Marilise that we should consider leaving at first light. The strangeness of our experience had escalated beyond a comfortable threshold, and I felt a pressing responsibility for our safety. The morning unfolded with a picturesque haze blanketing the beach, the air fresh and tinged with the vibrant scent of the sea. The waves lapped gently at the shore, a serene backdrop to our simple ritual of enjoying a steaming cup of coffee paired with rusks, a timeless South African tradition. In that tranquil moment, the stunning beauty of the south coast was truly awe-inspiring, promising a perfect day for fishing. Regardless of the events of the previous day, Marilise and I decided to stay until the afternoon. However, as I savoured the last sips of my coffee, the peculiarity of the previous night revisited us. In the distance, two figures could be seen making their way along the beach toward our spot. Initially, they appeared to be just fellow beachgoers, perhaps out for a morning stroll. Their pace was unhurried, almost leisurely at times. Yet, as they drew nearer, their movement slowed further, revealing an eeriness to their approach. It was then that the oddity of their appearance truly struck me, sending a shiver down my spine. Their slender bodies, about my height, were entirely grey, their colour almost merging with the misty backdrop of the coast. Their skin, or perhaps it was some form of tightly fitting attire, was adorned with green, organic-like patterns that subtly shifted as they moved. Their large, featureless eyes added to their alien appearance, making it impossible to discern any gender. They eventually stopped about 200 meters away from us, close enough for us to realize their oddity, yet too far to discern any finer details. The most disconcerting aspect of these figures were those large, expressionless eyes, which seemed to be fixed on us. As mentioned before, this was a highly secluded beach, rarely visited by people, so at that moment, we felt utterly alone with whatever these beings were. I had already resolved to pack up and leave, even before they got too close, but Marilise, pointing towards them, drew my attention to something peculiar. Joey, too, had noticed the figures and was intently observing them. Yet, in a departure from her usual behaviour, she remained silent, her gaze fixed on them, but without any sign of agitation. Marilise, who was studying anthropology at university in those days, found her initial apprehension giving way to a deepening intrigue in these otherworldly people. I kept a watchful eye on the figures as I hurriedly gathered our fishing equipment. One of them had now seated itself on the sand, gazing out at the sea, while the other appeared to be observing the seagulls flying overhead. I wondered if they were merely pretending not to be too interested in us. With Joey calm and Marilise's interest piqued, and the two beings seemingly absorbed in surroundings, I reconsidered our hasty departure. Though very strange, there was an unusual sense of calm in the air. At times it felt like a palpable energy that was emitted by them and amplified by the sereneness of the natural environment itself. Then I thought, why waste a beautiful day for fishing? In any case, my own curiosity was beginning to outweigh my initial unease. Marilise tried to capture this extraordinary encounter with her camera. However, each time she aimed at the figures, they would vanish from the frame, only to materialize again as soon as she lowered the camera. It was a baffling phenomenon that added to the surreal nature of our experience. In an effort to alleviate our lingering apprehension and restore some semblance of normality, Marilise suggested we continue fishing. To our surprise, the figures kept their distance, occasionally glancing our way with what seemed like a dispassionate curiosity. This strange impasse enveloped us in an almost otherworldly sense of peace, leaving us to wonder if we were witnessing visitors from another realm, their purpose as mystifying as their presence. Then, the atmosphere took a sudden, alarming turn. Joey abruptly rose and dashed towards the water's edge, barking and growling with an intensity I'd never seen in her before. Her focus was fixed on the waves. Our otherworldly visitors, who had since moved further away and were seated at a distance, sprang to their feet, their attention drawn to the same spot that had captivated Joey. What followed was a scene straight out of a nightmare. A grotesque creature, reminiscent of the Balinese sea demon from your video, emerged from the waves. It was a massive entity, the size of a small trailer, and it bore a terrifying resemblance to a gigantic crustacean or arachnid. With menacing pincers akin to those of a crab or scorpion, it charged out of the water, heading straight for Joey. The creature moved with a disturbing agility, its intent clear and frightening. As we prepared to rush forward in a desperate attempt to save our dog, I noticed that our strange visitors were now much closer, about 50 meters away. One of them raised an arm, and from his palm, a violet light shot out, striking the creature. The beast recoiled as if electrocuted, emitted an unearthly sound, and hastily retreated back into the sea. Our greenish-grey visitors sprang into action without a moment's delay. Pursuing the creature, they waded into the water until they were knee-deep, And that's when something extraordinary happened. A bizarre blue energy bubble formed around them, similar in design to the larger structure we had observed above the sea the previous day, albeit much smaller. They positioned themselves inside the bubble, which then transitioned from being translucent to a solid silver color. This structure seemingly was a craft of some sort. For a moment, it moved like a boat tracing the path taken by the crab-like creature. Before our eyes, it dove beneath the waves, disappearing just as abruptly and mysteriously as the creature it had pursued. We stood there, frozen, trying to comprehend the surreal and terrifying events that had just unfolded before us. Still reeling from shock and disbelief, we quickly grabbed Joey and began to pack our belongings with a sense of urgency. The need to distance ourselves from that beach and the enigmatic events that unfolded was overwhelming. The entire drive home was engulfed in a heavy silence, with each of us immersed in our own thoughts, attempting to process the surreal experiences we had just endured. That encounter has etched itself indelibly into our memories, constantly challenging our perception of the world as we know it. In the aftermath, we often speculated about the intentions of our two mysterious visitors. It seemed they were waiting for the appearance of that crab spider-like creature. Were they there to protect us? Or were we unwittingly used as bait in some strange cosmic game? The true motive behind their actions remained an enigma. All these years we've been haunted by so many questions. Who were the green-grey beings? Where did they come from? What was their purpose? And the creature that emerged from the sea, it was something out of a horror tale. What was it? We were grateful that it never crossed our paths again. That is until I watched your video on the Balinese sea demon, which brought back a flood of memories and a chilling sense of familiarity. It's a story we've rarely shared, but one that continues to resonate with us, a testament to the enigmatic mysteries of nature. Yours sincerely, John.
And now, our last story in this compilation is the horrific experience of two travelers on a remote road in the United States. We received the following harrowing story from someone who had a horrific experience on the road less traveled. Hi, Chuck here. Sometimes the roads less traveled hold stories that are better left untold, stories that lurk in the shadows, waiting for the unwary. This is one such story, a journey that began as an escape but turned into a chilling encounter with the unknown. It was an ordinary summer evening when Alex and I decided to take a road trip, a chance to break free from the routine of our daily lives. We chose a route less known, a remote road that snaked through dense forests and untouched wilderness. As we drove, the city's concrete jungle gave way to the untamed beauty of nature, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a sense of unease began to settle in. The road, once a path to freedom, now felt like a corridor to the unknown. Our phones, our lifeline to the outside world, lost their signal, leaving us in a bubble of isolation. We came across a gas station, an old, weathered building that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The attendant, a man with deep-set eyes and a disconcerting smile, greeted us. There was something off about him, a sense of darkness that lay beneath his friendly facade. He spoke of the road ahead with a warning tone, hinting at dangers that lurked in the night. We shrugged off his words, attributing them to the eccentricities of a solitary life. As we continued our journey, the darkness grew thicker, almost tangible. The trees loomed over us, their branches clawing at the night sky. A sense of paranoia crept in, a feeling that we were not alone, that eyes unseen were watching our every move. To make matters worse, Alex discovered our mobile phones were gone. Someone must have removed them while we were using the restroom at the old gas station. Then, without warning, our path was blocked. A fallen tree lay across the road, too perfectly positioned to be an accident. It was then that we heard it, footsteps, deliberate and slow, approaching from the darkness. Our hearts raced as fear gripped us. Out of the shadows emerged the attendant, his sinister intentions now clear. He pointed a shotgun at our vehicle and blew out 2 of the tires. He forced us out of the car. He spoke of how this road was his domain, how he preyed on the unsuspecting travelers who dared to traverse it. His words were cold, devoid of humanity, revealing a soul twisted by malice. We managed to escape, or at least for a while. He pursued us. What followed was a nightmarish struggle, a fight for survival against a foe who knew the road like the back of his hand. We were outmatched, but not defeated. Our will to live, to see another day, fueled our resistance. Every second was a battle, every breath a defiance of the fate he had planned for us. At a critical juncture, he wielded a menacing chainsaw. It seemed he wanted to use it to slaughter us. We climbed up a pine tree, hoping to hide from him. There we were, concealed amidst the pine branches, fervently praying that our presence would escape his notice. Despite our efforts, he eventually detected us, leading to a heart-stopping moment as he mercilessly felled the tree. Descending from our refuge, our survival hung by a thread. Fortunately, the branches cushioned the fall of the trunk, onto which we clung, sparing us from the worst. In a twist of fortune, one of the branches executed an unexpected maneuver, sweeping beneath his feet and ensnaring him by the ankle. This unforeseen turn of events bought us precious moments to extricate ourselves from the perilous situation. Seizing the opportunity, we made a swift escape, leaving behind the chaotic aftermath and the immobilized threat that, for a brief interlude, had been our pursuer turned captive. As the initial rays of dawn pierced through the lingering darkness, they carried with them a profound sense of hope, a promise of survival. The night, with its shadows and the looming threat of a monster disguised as a man, had been endured. The road had become a transformative journey, leaving an indelible mark on our souls, a haunting memory destined to resonate in the recesses of our minds. Navigating the twists and turns, we eventually found ourselves on a desolate highway. A serendipitous encounter awaited us as a compassionate family in an SUV extended a helping hand. Grateful for their kindness, we hitched a ride to safety. Upon reaching the safety of civilization, we wasted no time in reporting the harrowing incident to the authorities. The wheels of justice began to turn, and we later received feedback that the perpetrator had been apprehended. Astonishingly, he was already under scrutiny, listed as a suspect linked to a series of disappearances in the area. Our journey through the night had not only tested our resilience, but had also inadvertently contributed to the removal of a menace from one of the many beautiful remote areas in our country. The echoes of that fateful night would forever remind us of the fragility of life and the importance of standing against the shadows that seek to engulf it. Now, when I hear of a road less traveled, a path unexplored, I remember that night, the terror, the fight. I remember the echoes of the road, a reminder that sometimes the true horror lies not in the supernatural, but in the depths of human depravity. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Share your off-the-beaten-track safety tips in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.